Oh, it is never fun to break down a Vikings blowout loss, but we're going to do it anyway because this is the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3, you like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, your pal, and the kid you copied off in math class. My name is Luke Braun. You can find me on Twitter at Luke Braun NFL. Show is on Twitter at Locked On Vikings. This show is available wherever you find your favorite shows, as well as Amazon Fire and Roku. Just download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. And thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Today's Monday Breakdown episode is brought to you by Ultimate Football GM. If you've ever dreamed of becoming an NFL GM and managing your football franchise, then this game is definitely for you. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com or look it up on the app stores. Our listeners get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code LOCKEDON, in all caps, in the game. We are breaking down the 41-17 drumming that the Vikings suffered at the hands of the Green Bay Packers. That is the worst thing that can happen, is losing in a blowout to the Packers. Happened too many times recently. I remember being pretty upset after the 2021 Sean Mannion game. That was just such a pain to watch. Full disclosure, though, I'm coming at this from a different angle. Because if you listen to the postcast, you already knew this. If you follow me on Twitter, I had tickets to Rams-Chargers, which was going on at the same time. I bought them when I thought that would be Sunday Night Football. I'd be able to watch the Vikings and then go, and then it got flexed, so I had to miss the game. So I had to catch up on it later, but I already knew all the broad strokes and that there were a lot of turnovers and missed kicks and stuff and that the Vikings got blown out. So I could kind of sit down and watch the game with, I think, a more level head than I would have had if I'd watched it live and, gone through the emotions of the frustration and all that stuff. It's still a very frustrated game. I am very frustrated with the Vikings. But I think it's easier to sort of step away. So I kind of want to take advantage of that, as much of a bummer as it always is to miss a Vikings game, even the bad ones. I kind of want to, make lemonade out of lemons a little bit and try to take a more level-headed approach instead of just going crazy and saying, let's just fire everyone and everyone's stupid and I hate it all. You're going to get that from every other show, right? So maybe I can give you something a little different. And so what I want to do is just go through what I thought were the more concerning problems and say, okay, what do we do about that stuff? And I think that might be the way we have to approach this. But first, if you are just looking for a quick recap, I know most of you probably don't want to relive it, so I won't go blow by blow. But it really did feel like, watching the first part of the game, that the Vikings did outplay the Packers for about a quarter and a half. And they had that punt block was really great. They get this goal line possession, but then they go 3 and out there. They lose Austin Schlottmann to a pretty rough leg injury. I think fractured fibia was the diagnosis Kevin O'Connell gave us on the podium. That would be by far a season-ending injury. That's a really rough one. So you had Chris Reed in, and now Chris Reed has not been a center for most of the year. He got a little bit of room at center. In fact, that, I believe, was the first non-preseason center action that Chris Reed has ever gotten. And I remember Chris Reed being a talking point in the preseason about well, why doesn't he start over Bradbury? Why can't we have him compete with Bradbury? I think we found out because he got cooked on that goal line possession, and then there were all kinds of other pre-snap problems. So you kick there and you go up 3-0. And then on the ensuing kickoff, you get a kickoff return, 105 yards. Jalen Naylor gets out of his lane. And then a pick six that comes on a deflection off of, I think TJ Hawkinson actually popped it up in the air on a contested catch that he messed up. Darnell Savage picks it off, takes it to the house. Suddenly you're down 14-3, right? And you're just chasing the game. You unravel from there. 3 straight scoring drives that you give up to the Packers going into halftime. Vikings can't get a first down until the 5th, 6th possession of the game. So you're totally unraveling on offense. And I will tell you right now, if we're playing the blame game, which I don't love to play, but people always ask it, so I'll give it to you now. Offense gets way more blame than defense for me. Defensively, they had some bad drives, but I think defensively they got a lot closer to doing their job than the offense did. And the offense looked like they couldn't put together a high school game plan. I mean, the offense did some stuff that was just like utterly pathetic. And it starts with those turnovers and stuff. Obviously not great to give up 3 straight scoring drives going into halftime, though. No, by no means is the defense free of sin here. And then on the other side of the half, it just kind of keeps going. And the Vikings fall apart. They give up 3 more scoring drives, and I think 4 or 5 before the 2s came in. And before you know it, it's 41-3. Vikings score a couple of garbage time touchdowns to make the score a little bit less iconic, and you move on. There was just so much that went wrong that is preventable, like that should be preventable. It's one thing when you line up and you see like versus Dallas and you just see like, all right, Micah Parsons just killed Christian Darrisaw and got a strip sack. All right, your guy lined up on our guy, your guy won. Got it. It's another thing when it's pre-snap penalties putting you behind the chains, and it's the cleats thing, and we'll talk about that in a second. It's missed kicks, it's botching special teams things that should be automatic. It's getting caught with 10 men on the field and then getting caught in a late substitution with 12 men on the field. Like if you look at all of those games, Philly, Dallas, and this one, they all kind of start with turnovers and stuff kind of happening earlier in the game. And you look at the first half of the Colts too, which I think goes in that same category of like, Jesus Christ, they just did not show up. It's always turnovers and disasters and stuff that's not like normal football things. If you could just line up and play a regular game and just get first down, second down, third down, and everybody knows what the play call is supposed to be, then you get rid of the worst things the Vikings have done. But the fact that we are so often begging for that which we should take for granted, and we're begging the Vikings to get on it, I think that's the thing that we're going to be talking about. And I think we're going to be talking about this all offseason, honestly, no matter how this season ends. We're going to be talking about, man, but they got the crap kicked out of them 3 times. And hey, maybe there'll be a playoff game we talk about too if things go bad. You got to figure out how to not have those games, right? You got games where you played poorly and you fought and you scraped and clawed and you found a win in it. Love those, right? We love to have that. But we got to get rid of these games where you show up and you just don't even know, like, it looks like you haven't even seen a football before. That can't happen. And so that's what I take away from this one. It's how do we get better at the easy stuff? What's the easy stuff? If we get better at that, if you can just get to the line of scrimmage and get the snap count right, what kind of team do we have? And I think games like this don't happen if you can get that kind of stuff down. But the fact that they didn't means they didn't deserve to win, and they wouldn't deserve to win if they were playing a Division III college team, if they can't get the snap count right and they can't, get their special teams lanes right and all of that stuff. Anybody beats you when you do that. And you can't have that kind of stuff happen in the playoffs. So they better go fix it. There are a few things, 4 in particular, that I think really led to this loss that are sustained issues that if you don't fix them, like, they will keep losing you games, right? It's one thing to get a tipped interception that gets housed. That's the kind of, there's no fix for that, right? You just hope it bounces better next time. Field goal doinks it and that kind of stuff. But there are things that the Vikings did that I think are more worth focusing on. So that's what I'm going to get into next. But first, let me talk to you about Ultimate GM. Look, I know a lot of you love this because I've seen how many of you listen to the podcast when it's draft season or free agency season, and you want to talk about learn about the cap and all that stuff. We will do a lot of that on Locked On. But if you want to scratch that itch, that franchise mode, kind of build your dynasty thing, that is what Ultimate Football GM is for. You got to hire the right coaches. You have to make good player trades, make the right picks, manage the caps and free agency and all that stuff. It's pretty sweet. We have a little league at Locked On that we're all trying to win the Super Bowl in, so that's pretty cool. And Locked On Vikings listeners will also get a 100% free boost to their franchise when using the promo code Locked On in the game store. That's Locked On, all caps. So make sure you check it out today. Download the game. You can just visit ultimate-gm.com, or you can look it up on your app store. That's ultimate-gm.com. Ultimate Football GM is what you search on the app store. Start your dynasty today. Thanks again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen in the morning, especially on mornings where thinking about the Vikings isn't very fun. For your second listen, you can go check out Locked On Sports Today. They'll be talking about all the major stories and stuff. You can also check me out on Patreon. After each game, that whole week worth of Patreon goes up. So you can see a Duke Shelley breakdown. That's all now public, free to watch. You can see an end game management thing. And an interesting observation now that the Vikings look like they're going to be playing against the Giants. This is really relevant for a very probable wild card matchup. About the way the Giants attacked the Vikings center. About they tried to attack the backup center in a really interesting way, and they kind of got punished for it. I'll leave it at that, but we might bring that up in the lead up to wild card weekend if it indeed does end up being the Giants. But I should probably update you on seeding while we're there. So the Vikings dropped to the third seed in this one because the 49ers won. And the Eagles lost, but because the Vikings lost, they can no longer catch the Eagles. And they can't catch the Cowboys either. So and they can't catch the 49ers. They don't have tiebreakers on any of those teams. So the Vikings are now no longer in contention for the 1 seed, even though Philly hasn't clinched it yet because they could still lose the whole division to Dallas, which would be very interesting. But all of that said, the Vikings are either 2 or 3 seed, and they're sitting in the 3 seed right now. If they win and San Francisco loses next week, the Vikings get back to the 2. Otherwise, they're the 3. The Giants are locked in at the 6 seed. So that means that if the Vikings, unless the 49ers lose to who is it? David Blau? What a story that would be for the guy that was on the Vikings practice squad. They'll be in the 3 seed and they'll play the Giants. And of course the Vikings also have to beat Justin Fields, and Kirk Cousins might not play in that game. And I honestly wouldn't blame the Vikings if they didn't play Kirk Cousins in that game. Unless they wanted to get Chris Reed and Kirk Cousins some time together. And I think I'm going to start with that stuff. But otherwise, the Vikings would then play, if they get the 2nd seed, they'll play Lions, Packers, or Seahawks. Whoever ends up getting that spot would be an interesting thing to watch in Week 18. But let's talk about this Chris Reed thing. That one bugs me, I think, more than anything but the cleats thing in this game. It's one thing, to just guys were kind of slipping around and oops, again, tipped interception, kickoff return stuff bugs me, but it's one mistake with a very large impact, and you can fix one mistake. You can go tell Jalen Naylor, hey, don't get out of your lane next time. And now we don't think that'll happen again. But the snap count there were 4 different moments when the Vikings got a 5-yard penalty because Chris Reed screwed up the snap. That's unacceptable. I don't care if that's a 3rd stringer. That's completely unacceptable, right? And I don't think if you told Chris Reed that, he'd be like, yeah, I know. Here's what I'll say. I mean, a lot of people are saying he's the 3rd stringer and he wasn't even a center. And most teams are not going to keep 3. It would be pretty dumb, I think, to keep 3 true blue centers on your roster. When you get down to the 3rd guy kind of anywhere on the offensive line, it's almost always going to be somebody moving over and playing out of position. But you have been on this team since March? When did we get Chris Reed? You spent the whole offseason with this team. You got to know the snap counts. Even though Chris Reed was in charge of snapping, if he played guard, is he to be, getting off his snap late because he doesn't know when the snap is supposed to be. Twice, the Vikings were set up, ready to snap. Kirk Cousins tries to snap it, and the ball doesn't come. And then 2 other times, it's a miscommunication, and somebody gets called with a false start because the snap doesn't come, but the line goes. Just snap the ball. That should be the easiest thing. It's the first thing that has to happen on any play, and the Vikings can't even get into the play because they can't snap the ball. That's just so frustrating to me. And again, I get it. He's a guard. He doesn't have center experience. And what were you going to do? Roster Josh Sokol, right? That's what the Vikings would have had to do. Put Josh Sokol on their 53. You're not going to do that. But Chris Reed was always going to be the 3rd string center. And with that responsibility in mind, especially now that there's been a few games where he's 1 injury away from playing, being that far off of the snap count is a pretty unacceptable mistake. But the good news is it's a fixable mistake. And Kirk Cousins said it in his press conference. He's like, we'll figure it out, right? We'll get in together. We'll drill it. We'll get it down. And that's what I want to see from the Bears game. And that's really where I want to take this is in that Bears game, I want to see Chris Reed play, and he almost certainly will, because even if Garrett Bradbury's healthy, you're not going to play him in that game. And Schlote's out. I want to see Chris Reed play. I want to see him get through the whole game without screwing up a snap. That would make me very happy. And that is a very low bar. You should be able to do that as a guy who now is going to spend the whole week understanding that you are playing center today, Chris. There. get through the whole game without screwing up a snap count. That would be awesome. Whether it's Cousins or Mullins, like get through a whole game without screwing up the snap count. I'll feel a little bit better about that. The other thing that really bugged me about this game was the cleats problem. That is another kind of unacceptable thing. This is not an unfamiliar place. The Vikings play at Lambeau Field every single year, and they play late in the year a lot, and they have people on that staff, in particular, Dennis Ryan, equipment manager, has prepared the Vikings for many a game, and it's not his fault. He's just somebody you might want to listen to because he has been in that organization forever, and he's done a lot of Lambeau games, a lot of frozen Lambeau games, a lot of slick turf. Like he's done a lot, or slick grass. He's done a lot. But according to Kevin O'Connell and some reporting, they had a sign on every player's locker that the turf might be a little slick, and they talked about it throughout the week. They had a lot of discussion about making sure that they were set up to succeed here, that they should use like 7, I think they're called like 7-point or 7 spike cleats that will give you better traction on the slick turf. And they say, we highly recommend that you do this. Now, it was important to them that they didn't require, right? And I think that that's correct to do because there are a few things in football more dangerous than wearing like equipment that you're not comfortable in. If you're not comfortable running, you're not only are you not going to play well, but that's genuinely dangerous. So I get being like, if you just cannot get comfortable in these, like that's going to be up to you and that's your own thing. And I think that should be a decision up for the players. But that means that if they make the wrong decision and they got punished, Justin Jefferson was slipping all over, TJ Hawkinson slipping all over, their incompletions, major moments, Eric Kendricks had a slip, Brian Asamoah had slips. Players were slipping and sliding everywhere. You didn't see the Packers slipping. They know, and call that home field advantage, right? If you want to chalk it up to something. They know their turf. We don't know their turf. But we should know their turf. We go there every year. And when one team is slipping and sliding around and the other one isn't, that is a failure in preparation, I think, on the day. I think you got to get out on the field and be a little bit more serious about warming up and figuring out exactly what you are and aren't capable of on that turf. And if you have to use the 7-point cleats, do it. KJ Osborne used the 7-point cleats, came out after the game and was like, yeah, I didn't have any problem. It was fine. And I used those cleats. It was totally fine. So I think, and like what happened in this game because of the cleats was so impactful. One of the picks was a slip, right? There was a keeper flash that would have been to TJ Hawkinson with a ton of room to run. He falls over and he slips and he can't make it. There was a play, by the way, speaking of procedural easy stuff, 10 men on the field on a 3rd and 10, get the right amount of people on the field and get your shoes on. All kinds of this, like that should be automatic. We are in January. It is week 17. Get the snap count right and get the right amount of people on the field. It never changes. It's always 11. This shouldn't be hard. Count to 11 and get your shoes on. That's the stuff that really like bugs me about this game. It's the easy stuff. It's hard to keep Aaron Rodgers in the pocket and stop him from rolling out and finding a wide open guy on a scramble drill. It's always been hard to do that, right? That's just what Rodgers does. It's easy to get 11 people on the field. And failing at one is a lot more frustrating than failing at the other. And that's kind of where I'm at on this game. Get the easy stuff down in the Bears game. I don't care if you win in the Bears game. I don't care who plays in the Bears game. Do whatever you think is right for who needs rest and who needs momentum and whatever. That's something that, I'm not going to make judgments on that with people I've never met. The coaches are going to, the players know themselves and the coaches know the players. Let them figure that out. But get the right amount of people on the field and figure out the snap count and get your damn shoes on. That is my goal for the Bears game. That shouldn't be too much to ask. But there are a couple things the Vikings failed at that are hard stuff that I think are still worth noting. So we'll get into that stuff as well, of course. First, though, I want to talk to you about the best tasting protein bar on the planet. If you are a sweet tooth, you're looking for a little chocolatey treat, but you are not into all the calories, that is what Built Bar is for. And look, it's resolution season, all right? It's the new year, and I hope everybody had a great new year, by the way. And I know y'all are trying to be good, right? That is exactly what Built Bar is for. They can help satisfy those cravings without knocking you off the wagon. And they come in great flavors like churro, peanut butter brownie, a personal favorite of mine, coconut almond. They use like collagen protein, and I think they like aerate it, so it kind of tastes like almost like nougat almost. It's fantastic. And it's like 17 grams of protein because it's all protein, but only like 130 calories and 4 grams of sugar in one of these things. And now they're actually available at Walmart or Sam's Club. So you can go get a box there, or you can always still go get Built Bars at built.com if that's how you prefer to get them. Once again, that is at built.com. There are a couple of things that I noticed in this Vikings game. I'll do one on offense and one on defense that I think were really more sustainably like problematic things. Again, I am not going to kill them too bad. I mean, you criticize them for giving up a kick return or something like that, right? You identify what the problem is, you talk to that person about it, and you get over it. But there are a couple of things that I think are more long-term concerning that are worth pointing out. And the first one we go on offense. This one really is TJ Hawkinson, but it happened to Jefferson. It happened to Thielen. The Vikings did atrociously bad at the catch point. Cousins has been all season, and we have loved this from him. He has been firing into tight windows, kind of trusting his guys to box out the defender, get your body in front of him, and go make that catch. And I thought the Vikings did a terrible job of that. Jefferson did not do great at it. Of course, Jefferson didn't have a great game. He had like one catch, right? And on that, I'm going to look. Jefferson basically said that the Packers were living in two-man. And there was a ton of press. The broadcast made a point of how like Jair Alexander was like pressing the crap out of Justin Jefferson, really getting his hands on him on the release because he can do it really recklessly when you have safety help over the top. And that's the way the Lions and Eagles did it way back in the beginning of the season. And then nobody did it again. So I don't know what that was about. But they are going to have to find a way to punish that. That's better, even though they kind of haven't had to. I don't know. If I were preparing for the Vikings, that would be the first plan for me. But I don't know. They get paid and I don't, so who's to say? But that had so there was that, right? But also you had the one where Jair Alexander did like the second worst gritty we've seen against the. I mean, every time you score on the Vikings, you do anything, you get a gritty, right? Like it's not like this big thing, but you gotta like work on it, man. Like that was Mike Gesicki tier gritty. All right, Jair, if you're listening to this. And you got away with a pass interference on it. So, and Jefferson slipped. So, calm down. But what I will say is Jefferson did not do a good job of coming back to the ball. I think that's because he lost his footing. But in other situations, Adam Thielen had a couple early in the game where he didn't do a great job of kind of coming back to the ball and finding that space that Cousins could throw to. Hawkinson in particular did a really bad job of this on that first interception. He has to get himself a little bit upfield and come back to the ball a little bit on those things so that there is a place that Cousins can put that ball where only he has a shot at it. I think that Osborne did okay with it and Hawkinson in the second half did okay with it. It was just kind of too little too late. But coming back to the ball and helping your QB out is one thing. Now, probably going to find that Cousins is not free of sin here, right? And he wouldn't say he is either. The third interception at the very least, he just didn't look off a backside quarter safety like he should have, and that was an interception. If you remember the interception it wasn't exactly. It was quarter half. I think Harrison Smith has gotten basically that same interception on people this year. And I would also probably apportion some amount of blame on him for the strip sack just because, you got to have some ball security, right? It's not your fault that Oli Udoh or it was Ed Ingram gets killed by Kenny Clark, but you take the sack, but don't fumble on it, right? So we could sit there and play that blame game forever. I'm going to leave that to other shows. What I will say is you got to have that. You got to help each other a little bit more, I think, is the way to put it. And I don't think the Vikings did a very good job of helping each other out and helping their teammates to succeed. And they all had the same line in the locker room after the game. They all kind of came and said, we got to look inward. We got to look at ourselves. We got to fix our own stuff and all that. And I think that's a healthy attitude to have after this locker room. You're not blaming. You're not pointing fingers. You're not getting angry with each other. It's all, okay, I just screwed up a whole bunch. How do I fix it? And how do I grow from this, right? And I think that's a good way to approach this it's good life advice, right? You screw something up, figure out how you can grow from it. The thing that I think is most concerning was on defense, and I don't think the coverage was that bad. Duke Shelley seemed like he had a pretty good day. I want to look at it closer because it feels like we got a corner here. And Duke Shelley bona fide started. This was not an injury thing because when the twos came in at the end of the game, you had Nick Mullins and Madison and all these guys. Cam Dantzler was in at the end of the game with the rest of the twos. He was healthy enough to play in the meaningless parts of a game. You wouldn't do that with an injured player, and he wasn't on the injury report anyway, so you wouldn't do that. Dantzler just lost his job to Duke Shelley, and we should probably acknowledge how crazy that is, considering that Shelley was cut earlier this season off of the Bears, and now here he is earning a starting job, and earning it too. It's not just that Dantzler was such a disaster. The other guys, not a Chris Jones, Chris Boyd thing like in 2020. Duke Shelley earned it. And again, you can check out my Patreon video. I kind of talked myself through it, and by the end of that video, I went, no, I actually am okay with this. I think that's the right move. Pretty sick stuff. And I do think that the coverage did a decent job. I don't know. We'll find out. They did have the Josh Metellus touchdown. Gives up a touchdown as the single high safety where he didn't react to the strong side number 3 coming deep. And I think as the middle safety, that's like the first thing you should read. So that's a pretty bad mistake by Metellus. If I'm right about the coverage rules, I will look into that more though. So if I'm wrong, I'm sorry. But Metellus kind of got caught cheating to the weak side and definitely shouldn't have been doing that. But it was the front that got bowled over. And here's the other thing I'm going to say. It felt like, with a few very visible exceptions, it felt like the vast majority of the bad things that happened to the Vikings backups. You know, I mean, there's the coming back to the ball issue that happened to Hawkinson, right? We saw Ed Ingram get beat by Kenny Clark, that kind of stuff. Okay, that's a problem. We got to fix that stuff. But then it's like Patrick Jones getting bowled over because he's playing, on his 4th drive of the day. Josh Metellus is not going to be the single high safety in the playoffs. That's going to be Harrison Smith. But Harrison Smith was on a pitch count in this one. Eric Kendricks was on a pitch count in this one. Brian Asamoah slip sliding around, shooting the wrong gap and stuff like that. You had a bunch of TJ Smith, guy elevated off the practice squad playing nose. Asezi Atomowo, Kyrie's Tonga. That's not Phillips and Tomlinson. And those backups got sledded a lot, and they played in this game a lot more than you're going to see in the playoffs. And I know that sounds like I'm just excuse making, but I will say I did call it. If you go back and listen to the crossover I did with Peter Bukowski, it was one of the first things I said was they're not going to play all their dudes. They're not going to, Harrison Smith wasn't going to play the full game. Dalvin Tomlinson, Harrison Phillips, they weren't going to play their usual workload. And it certainly won't be that way in the Bears game again. If they opened as 1-point favorites, the Vikings did, which implies that the market thinks the Bears would win on a neutral field, which sounds crazy, but that game might be Nick Mullins. Probably not as crazy when you think of it that way. I would be I don't think Jefferson should play that game, especially now that the record stuff is a little bit further out of reach. I don't think he should play that game. And so while I do have concerns, and I've had concerns all year about the physicality of the Vikings and their ability to just hold up against a straight up and down duo run. You look at a team like Philly or San Francisco or Dallas, they all can beat you up. And we are not a physical team right now. We were out physicaled hard on the defensive side of the ball by the Packers. And those teams will only do it to us worse. So you have to figure out a way to either get more physical, or you just have to be more willing to load the box. You need a solution to that. You cannot let them run for 9 yards a pop on every zone toss because you got guys getting washed out like crazy. That said, a lot of the guys who are the culprits for that, you would not expect to be in the game. And, you won't get some of these starters back, right? Like Brian O'Neill goes out of this game with a calf injury. You can't say, oh, well, Oli Udoh got beat. It's fine. He's a backup. Well, it's not fine. He's going to be playing now if Brian O'Neill isn't ready for the playoffs, which it sounds like that would be a lucky outcome if he was. Chris Reed might have to play in the playoffs. We got to fix that. You might not get the starter back. But in cases like Josh Metellus, cases where it was just resting a veteran, you can put that guy in as much as you want. And if you don't trust him, if he keeps screwing up, you can just not put him in. And that's totally fine. Really easy fix to that problem, right? Just don't put Josh Metellus in over Harrison Smith. Probably weren't going to do that in the playoffs anyways. So there are problems to solve. Some of them are real easy fixes. Go drill your snap counts. Go send Chris Reed home and have him memorize snap counts. And, there are harder things to play with. Like your guys got pushed back 5 yards and it set up a 2nd and 5. and then they can do anything on second. That's a way harder problem to fix. But I think I come away from this one. I really expected to see worse stuff. I know that sounds crazy after a 41-17 loss, but seeing the score before I watched the game, I really expected to watch the game and see this total horror show of a whole bunch of stuff. A bunch of unlucky bounces, a few very specific problems that need to be solved, but I don't think this portends the doom of the Vikings. If they lose in the playoffs, I think it's going to be because of something else other than what we saw in this game. I really do. But hey, that is all conversations for the postseason, which the Vikings will definitely be in. And only one team on the field today could say that. So we'll talk about that. Hey, send me your questions, though. Twitter Tuesday. Send them to me at Luke Braun NFL or at Locked On Vikings on Twitter, LockedOnVikingsPodcast@gmail.com, or there's a Google form in the show notes. We'll see you on Twitter Tuesday. See you there. And as always, Skol.